Tired? After all that dancing? How late did the disco party go? Some of you are still dancing right now. Okay, I need to test your legs. Everybody has to stand up right now. Everybody has to stand up. I'm starting this session testing your brain. Your legs were tested last night. I'm going to test your brain today. And I want you to read the following sentence. The one rule that I have is you cannot collaborate and work with the people next to you. Do this individually. Got it? Okay, here's the first question. Count the letter F's. Oh, no, to yourself in your head. Don't do it aloud. And everybody look at me when you have finished the counting so I know who is finished and who is not finished. Don't say anything. Oh, don't say anything. Okay, if you counted one letter F, please sit down right now. If you counted one letter F. Okay, a couple people have sat down. Maybe you're still tired from last night. If you counted two letter F's, please sit down. If you counted two letter F's, please sit down. If you counted three letter F's, please sit down. If you counted four letter F's, please sit down. Okay. If you counted five letter F's, please sit down. If you counted six letter F's, please sit down. Okay. Congratulations to the people that are still standing up. The correct answer is 7 letter F's. Now, you may all sit down. You may all sit down. As you know, it's a trick question. Now, I'm a little upset with you because a couple individuals, I won't tell you who they are, ruined this experiment because they said that they had counted 6 or they counted 5, and then other people started counting extra F's because they were thinking in their head, how come I didn't count 6? How come I didn't count 5? Typically, when I do this experiment, almost everybody sits down at 3 letter F's. Almost every single person. But because a couple individuals didn't follow the instructions and they blurted out 6 or they blurted out 7, it influenced everybody else. The reason why people normally sit down when they count 3 is because they only count the F in finished, the F in files, and then usually the F in scientific. And what F's do they forget? They forget the ofs. And now what was the trick question? The F in the initial prompt. Right? So understand that this was an atypical group. 80% of you were still standing up after 3. But usually, 80% of you are sitting down after 3. Here's my next question. You are the CEO of a large multinational company. Would you hire Alan or would you hire Ben? Please do not blurt out your answer for at least 20 seconds. Let me give you all time to think about it. Would you hire Alan or would you hire Ben? Okay, again, we're having trouble following instructions. Okay, raise your hand if you would like to hire Alan. Raise your hand if you would like to hire Ben. Now raise your hand if you did not raise your hand. They're the same, but they're not the same. Now, a follow-up question that you could have asked me is, what's the criteria? Or why did you list the words in a different order? But what I want to underline here is a psychological deficit that we all have. I call this the halo effect. One time I was in Podgorica, Montenegro. I know we have 6 of my Serbian friends here, close by to you in Podgorica. And I got into an argument with someone in the audience who said, Alan is better than Ben. And she was so confident about it. And she said the reason why is because the positive adjectives come before the negative adjectives. And then how did I respond to her? I said, well, I didn't tell you the words that come first are more important than the words that come second. And she said, yes, but that's how we're trained to think. There are a couple of you that speak Arabic in here, and you may read from right to left, but most individuals in this room are reading left to right, but you're also understanding that you privilege things that are more primary, that come first. Let me give you an example of this. I one time was in a room with individuals who wanted to be investment bankers at both Yale University and Harvard University. These were students that were about your age. And I gave them a hypothetical. If the CEO of Goldman Sachs was a Harvard graduate, they would be more likely to hire the Harvard students in this room. Why? And of course, the first answer that the Harvard students gave was Harvard's a better university, so therefore we're more qualified. And I said, no, that's not the case. But then even the Harvard and the Yale students said, the reason why the CEO will hire the Harvard person is because they want to help out Harvard University. Does anybody know anything about Harvard University? They have an endowment of $43 billion, which is more than 50 or 60 country GPs in this world. They don't need extra help from one additional Goldman Sachs hire. The Goldman Sachs CEO, who does he want to help out? Not Harvard himself. So he should want to hire the best person, but he still will more likely hire the Harvard, even if the Harvard person's not as good as the Yale. And the reason why is when they sit down for the interview, what do you think the initial comments will be? Oh, I see you went to Harvard. What house did you live in? Did you have Professor Mansfield for government? Is the cafeteria food still atrocious? And then that creates this halo effect. And then all the information that you get in after that, you receive in a positive sense. If the information was negative in the beginning, then you would look at the person in a negative way. And this is important to understand. Do you know the difference between introverts and extroverts? Here's my definition. If an introvert goes to a party and gets tired at that party, they're more likely an introvert. That energy from other people takes away from them. When an extrovert goes to a party, they leave that party with even more energy. So some of you last night couldn't fall asleep after you left the dance party, and some of you were falling asleep at the dance party. Thank you. I appreciate it. I have paid these 2 young ladies to, I call them my amen, and this is perfect. This is the halo effect. This is what I'm talking about. We have an exemplary speaker that about half of you heard yesterday. Neil Osborne is a graduate of the University of Oxford. The first time I lectured at the University of Oxford, one of the Oxford dons came up to me beforehand and said, I know you're an American and everything is awesome. But here in Great Britain, we have a stiff upper lip. And when you finish your lecture, nobody will even give you applause. You won't even get the polite smattering of golf applause. Don't go crying to your mother. We don't want these tears to stream down your face. This is what happens here for everybody. And so I thought, I have a friend who's a professor at Oxford. He's also an American where everything is awesome. Let me see if I can get his help. And I call him up and I say, Brandon, they just told me something interesting. Nobody's going to clap when I finish my lecture. He's a psychologist. We all know psychologists are professional pranksters. So he got 6 of his undergraduate students to show up at my lecture about an hour early. They were sitting in the front row. I finished my lecture. What do you think his students did? Not only did they start yelling, you 2 are very good at this, but they also stood up. And then what do you think everybody else did? They stood up as well. I got a standing ovation. I walk off the stage. I wink at the Oxford professor. And I say, does this remind you of 1776? I'm sorry. He'll hold me against that. Right? Actually, I'm going to embarrass someone right now. Milan Balaban, can you please stand up? You can sit down now because this is an embarrassing story. His face is about to go red, so he's lucky that he's facing this way. This guy was my student in the Czech Republic. First it was in Greece. Second was in the Czech Republic. This guy knows how to pick his countries. And then he organized, bless you, Budstorova. Как вам по-английски? Then he organized a speaker tour. I think we did 8 countries. We did the former Yugoslavia, plus Albania and Bulgaria. So depending on how you count countries. He listened to me give the same lecture on the United States Constitution 37 times. He never left the room. He stood there, and I'm thinking, what is this guy doing? He's either the biggest stalker in the world, or he's crazy. It's true that both have been confirmed, as you all know. About 18 months later, I was giving a lecture in Belgrade, Serbia, on the U.S. Constitution. Milan lives in Banja Luka, which is about 4 or 5 hours from Belgrade, depending on how he drives. He's crazy, so he drives quickly. And he shows up to the lecture, and I'm thinking, why is he coming again? He's heard this lecture 37 times. And he sits down in between 2 incredibly beautiful women. And then whenever I start to lecture, he says, I bet he's going to say this next. And when I'm about to say a joke, he says, here's the punchline. And guess what? One of those women became his longtime girlfriend. You're welcome. You're welcome. So it's important. Does anybody know who Laszlo Bock is? Laszlo Bock wrote a book called Work Rules, ! He runs human operations or human resources for Google. Google has been named the most admired company 5 or 6 times in the last 10 years. And one of his suggestions is that you should not interview for jobs because you can be biased like this. Does Usain Bolt interview for the gold medal in the 100-meter dash for the Olympics? No, he performs for it. And because of these cognitive deficits, we need to check the biases that we have. There's a reason why extroverts are more likely to do well in interviews than introverts and why they are overrepresented in management positions, because they're better able to create that instant halo effect. I want you to read this aloud. Everybody read this aloud right now. Okay, so you failed this one. About 85% of you read the following. A bird in the bush, right? What does it actually say? And then the bush. Okay? Usually there's a louder gasp. Oh, there it is. I'll pause here. Look at it again. A bird in the bush. Here's what's fascinating about your brains. Your brains are lazy. We say that they're cognitive misers. So when you don't have to do work, you won't do work. You put your brain, just like a pilot does in the airplane, on autopilot, into cruise control. And this is an issue when you're living in a volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous world. You have to be able to figure out how situations change quickly. And you can't be on autopilot. Because when you're on autopilot, that's when you miss things. That's when you make these mistakes. That's when you have these oversights. That's when you suffer from intellectual hubris. Okay, you have your notebooks. If you don't have your notebook and your pen, you need to take these evil... It's okay, I wasn't reading your chats. I don't know Cyrillic, you're lucky. To either take these, your computers, or your notebook paper, and I want you to number it 1 through 7. Number it 1 through... Oh, my Savior. So if you need a pen, who needs a pen? Raise your hand if you need a pen. If you don't have a smartphone, you can do this in your head? You haven't heard this one. But you are sitting next to 2 women right now. And then look up at me when you're all prepared to do this exercise. Okay. Number it 1 through 7, either on your smartphone or on your piece of paper. You have 3 minutes for this. What will happen is on the next slide, I will give you 7 uncertain values. And what you will have to do is put two guesses, a lower guess and a higher guess. So how many total guesses will you have on your sheet after this exercise? Mathematicians in this room. Good. So you have 14 total guesses. Now let me give you an example of what this means. These two guesses, what you're trying to do is put the lower guess and the upper guess so that the true value is somewhere in between, that you're 98% confident that that true value fits somewhere in between your two guesses. Let me give you an example of this. Let's say the uncertain value is my age. You might put, based either on my biography or the gray whiskers that are coming into my chin right now, 108. Oh my God. I didn't even dance last night. You might put 26 to 40 because you're 98% confident. I'm no younger than 26. I probably would not be a professor at RANEPA if I was 25. And I'm no older than 40, except for this individual here who thinks I'm 108. Okay? So 26 and 40. Maybe the uncertain value is how many students are at RANEPA. This would be a harder question for our international visitors, but you might put between 50,000 and 250,000 because you're 98% confident a huge university like RANEPA in 68 cities has no less than 50,000 students, but no more than 250,000 students. Okay, let me check in with you. I can't get questions because some of your questions may ruin the exercise accidentally. So what I'll do is continue to explain this, but then I'll ask you if you understand this. Okay, so for all of these exercises, I can't have you ask a question because it might end up biasing you on the response. You will have 14 total guesses, 2 for each one of these numbers that you have on your paper. On the next slide, I'll give you 7 quantities that we don't exactly know. There's one person in this room that will know one of the quantities, and it's not just because he's our genius business managing museum director, but because he lives in a country where one of the questions is coming from. And I picked it because I knew he would probably be the only person from the Netherlands in this room today. Okay? So these will be all uncertain values. I need to beg you not to talk to each other when these values go up. And I need to beg you not to guess these values as we're all working through this. You will have 3 minutes to complete this task. Your time begins now. Okay, 20 more seconds. Finish up your guesses. Okay. How do you think you did? Bad? Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to put up the slide, and you're going to count out of 7 how many you got correct. You would be correct if the 2 guesses contain the real value. That would be a correct answer. So you don't have to get exactly the number, obviously. I'm going to give you 1 minute to see how many you got correct here. Okay? Usually they're more, oh my gosh. Oh, there we go. This is more a class on sound effects than it is on leadership. This is the most emotional section of the room I've ever seen in my life. And then when you've finished tabulating all of your answers, look up at me so I know you've... $105 emails a day. 105 emails a day. Okay, you ready? I need you to be completely honest. Completely honest and be loud and proud in how honest you are. I want you right now to stand up. You got 0 right. If you got 0 right, stand up and take your chest out and say, I'm the woman now. I'm the man now. Oh, there we go. That's some honesty. Now stay standing. Even the dance champion got 0 right. If you got 1 right, stand up now. If you got 1 right, stand up. Okay? If you only got 2 right, stand up. No, everybody stand up who stood up before. So stay standing. If you got 2 right, stand up. And if you got 3 right, stand up. Okay, now, I wish I was as tall as this dude over here who finished in 2nd place probably in the dance competition. You're really tall. What percentage of the audience right now is standing up, do you think? If you had to estimate, just give it your best guess. 80%, 75%, 90%? 95% of you are standing up with only 3 answers. Now, if you only counted 4, if you only got 4 right, stand up. Okay, if you got 5 right, stand up. Okay, now everybody's standing, sit down. Everybody who has not stood yet, stand up. Okay, this guy doesn't count, my friend from Nigeria, only because he was my student in Macedonia. So you sit your ass down. Sit down, brother. How many did you get? You got, well, you should have been standing, so sit down. You got 4? Nobody got more than 4. How many did you get? 5. Handshake. Let's give him a round of applause. Serbia representing. Sladoled Sashlagam is going to be your award. Okay, my friend from Nigeria here, my former student, is claiming he got everything right. Let's ignore him for a second. I like doing that. He's a nice guy, so I feel like I can play with him a bit. But let me tell you something. I have stolen this, not the numbers, but the exercise, from a professor at Harvard who is affiliated with the Harvard Negotiation Project, Max Bazerman. And he has been doing this exercise for about 20, 30 years, and nobody has ever gotten them all right. I have done this exercise with about 10,000 people in 50 different countries, and only 3 people have gotten them all right. The first time it happened, I was in Zagreb, Croatia, close by to our Serbians' homeland here, and a woman out of about 300 people in the audience raised her hand high and said, I got 7 right. And then one kid said, bullshit. And then we said, okay, show us the answers. How did you get them all right? And she said, because I put 0 to 3 trillion for every single answer. And do you know what happened in the room? They almost murdered her. They said she was a cheater. No, but she's not a cheater. And she's not, yeah, thank you, defend her. She's not a cheater because I put on the prompt, these are uncertain values. You should have put, you didn't know any of these unless you're from the Netherlands. Did you get the question on the municipalities right? I love him. Now, look at this. This is a cognitive deficit that and you understand this can be important when it comes to leadership in the 21st century. You overassume and you overestimate your own knowledge. I joke, I'm a fake doctor. I was recently on a plane ride to Tashkent, Uzbekistan, and I had fallen asleep on the plane, and they had been making announcements saying that they needed a doctor to help with someone who was having a heart attack on the plane. And the stewardess came up to me and started shaking me and said, what are you doing? We need you back there. And I said, what are you talking about? We need a doctor to help with this person who's having a medical emergency. And I said, I can't help you. And I tried to go back to bed. And then another steward came up that was bigger and stronger and took me and started to bring me back. And I realized the person that bought my plane ticket, because I'm a PhD, which stands, the P stands for fake, P-H, fake doctor. Thank you. They thought that I could help with, I didn't stay at a Holiday Inn. My father is a real doctor. He's a medical doctor. And whenever we do carpooling to work and from work, he'll always tell me, I'll pick you up in 5 minutes. and I automatically multiply that by 4 or 5. If he says 5 minutes, that means 20 or 25 minutes. It's the same thing, particularly my friends that are from Moscow with the traffic and everything. The fastest you've ever gotten there, the world record speed is 5 minutes. But normally you hit the traffic lights or you hit some traffic or someone stops you on your way to the car and you don't get there in time. And this, I think, is one of our biggest issues, is that we have this planning fallacy, that we have this knowledge arrogance, and we need to be able to check it. Okay, a bat and a ball cost $1.10. The bat costs $1 more than the ball. How much does the ball cost? 10 cents. Good. What's this guy's name? That's a tough name to say. I'm going to let you say it yourself.
Obadiah.
Obadiah is now nervous because he thinks I'm going to make fun of him. And I am going to make fun of him. I keep my promises. Why am I going to make fun of him? In fact, in this room, about 80% of you would have agreed that the answer is 10 cents. What's the correct answer? He says, I don't know what it is, but I know that's wrong. It is 5 cents. Now, I can make fun of Harvard because I went to Harvard, so we can throw it under the bus. This is a really easy math question on the entrance test to American universities. Some of you may know of it as the SAT. And 72% of math majors at Harvard can miss this question. The reason why I use this university is almost 100% of math majors at Harvard got a perfect score on the SAT in math when they were 16 years old, when they were 17 years old. But after 2 years at Harvard, when they're 19, only 28% get this right, which means after spending $140,000 in 2 years at the best university in the world, you were dumber. Why do you miss this question? In fact, if I gave this question to you when you were only 13 or 14 years old, almost all of you would have gotten it right. And the reason why is on your notebook, you would have done an algebraic equation where you solve for x. But now you think this is easy, so you try to do it in your head. And you're more likely to get this right than if we brought in ministers from your country, members of parliament from your country, or high-level CEOs. They would have more intellectual hubris about handling something that looks so easy. I want you to visualize this in your head. Okay, don't say anything aloud, but I want you to mentally imagine this sentence. Okay, look up at me when you've pictured this. Some of you are budding novelists here, and you might have more details than others. Raise your hand if you want to volunteer what you pictured. People are afraid I'm going to make fun of them. What did you picture? Stand up. Were you number 11 last night in the dance competition? This guy was good. Let's give him a hand. Now, I'm not saying there was any corruption in the judging, but that was my dude last night. That was the guy I would have voted for. What did you picture? Where's that? Oh, stand up. Let's get this connection going on. A sky blue suit. This guy's a novelist. Or he has a crush on Anna. Probably both. Which bank? Which one? Oh, Sberbank. Where are you from? Do they have Sberbank in Nigeria? He has a business account here. Okay, you can sit down. Now, here's what's interesting. He just said bank. Typically what happens is I'll say, what bank? And they'll say, a bank. Which one? A bank, you stupid idiot. And then I'll say, Sberbank, Gazprom Bank. Oh, a financial bank. Because if you're in Egypt, maybe at the Cairo University near the Nile River, almost everybody in the room is going to think the bank of the river. When I was in Sochi around the time of the Olympics and we had gone skiing, many people pictured the bank of snow. You did my school in Jordan a couple years ago. If we did this in Jordan, in Wadi Rum, many people would think a dirt bank. Your perspective is going to be different based on your experience, based on what you've seen. One of my favorite videos is a homeless man who is blind begging for money. And the sign says, "I'm blind, please help." And nobody gives him money. And then a woman walks up to him wearing, not a blue suit, but your rich colors here, these incredibly bright green shoes. Nigeria is green for the soccer team. This is why I'm pointing to you, right? And she changes the words on the sign. And then all of a sudden, money starts coming in, like it's a flood. And then later in the day, she walks back up to him, and he says, "What did you do to my sign?" And she said, "I said the same thing, but with different words." She had changed the sign to say, "It's a beautiful day, and I can't see it." You crying? The point is that if you can at least inhabit the mindset of someone else, not only, and we'll talk about this, I have another session in a couple days on public speaking and how you can communicate. Not only can you inhabit the mindset of someone else to be more creative, to come up with more practical solutions, but then you can communicate that message more effectively too as well. If you can understand how to tailor your message to reach someone in the way that they understand it. Okay, I think this will be the last math equation I'll give you. I'm going to give you 1 minute and then you can speak, but please do not answer 10 cents or 5 or 6 right away, okay? You're going to solve this equation. The one caveat, meaning the one thing you can't do, is just add a single line to make it unequal. You can't just draw a line right through it. Bootsdorf, okay? So, you're going to add a single line to make this equation correct, but the one rule is you can't just make a not equal sign, okay? You have 1 minute to solve this equation. God bless you. Look up at me when you've successfully solved it. Oof. Oof. Woo. What does that say? Budget cuts this year, budget cuts. The ruble's a little bit. Yeah, that is, well, no, that shouldn't affect you. But if we do have some tech assistance. Do we just press one of these options? On the right? Oh, this computer. And make sure you don't prank me here because you want to leave and have lunch. That's my right, yeah? You guys are good because it's actually on your left. No? No, I'm joking. Okay. Okay. Now, please, do not rush to give me the correct answer. Do not all volunteer at once. I know this is really easy. You're looking at me like, why is he wasting my time? This was the easiest equation I've ever seen in my life. Why are you still looking at the equation? You solved it 40 seconds ago, didn't you? What's the correct answer? Come on. Stop it. Don't do this to me. Don't prank me like this. I'm a nice guy. Seriously, you're going to boycott me now? Is that what it's like? I'm a goofy-looking American, and you're saying you come into my house, I'm not going to participate with you? What's your name? Would you like the microphone? I think you'd look good with the microphone. He's wearing Nigerian colors here. Let's give him some props.
I'm from St. Petersburg. we should a line assigned to the equality sign. No?
Okay, that's the one thing you couldn't do.
Sorry. Sorry.
I didn't bring my wallet today because I don't want people like him to take it from me. Okay. What's your name?
My name is Yin. I come from China. We changed the equation from the equal mark to great or equal.
Okay, greater than. You can't do that though with the single line because then it would be indented. Let me see. No, that wouldn't actually equal, but that's a really good guess. Creative. Anybody else have another answer? You had an answer, no? No? Okay, are you ready? Look closely. Look closely, because I'm going to give you the correct answer on the next slide. And if you don't give me a collective, then you didn't understand it. Here we go. Let me move out of the way so I'm not blocking anyone here. I'm looking at all of your eyes to see this reaction. This is going to be my favorite moment in Kazan this summer. Maybe we should do a drum roll. Okay, not all of you got it. I still like you guys. Here we go. Let me do it one more time. TWSS. Oh, it's frozen now. There we go. Thank you, thank you. I'm here all week. Look at this. Now, obviously you survived an application process of 7,000 applications. You were the smartest people, etc., 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 but you're feeling really dumb right now. Now let me be your psychologist right now and make you feel better. We'll give you chocolate ice cream at lunch today. That was a false politician promise. I feel like Donald Trump up here. Only 3 people have ever gotten this right, almost similar to the previous exercise we did. And the 3 people who got it right were all younger than you. They were 15, 16 years old. And if you were younger, you'd be more likely to get this because creativity, innovation, usually comes when you combine things. And you have these cognitive blinders on, you're thinking about numbers, and I even biased you. I said, solve this equation. And I even said, this is the last math problem I'll give you. And so you're only thinking numbers, and you're not thinking of the possibility of letters and words. Now, the majority of you in this room are Russian. You have a different alphabet. Almost all of you, English is your second language or your third language. And so you may complain to me, and you may say, well, if English was my first language, I would have solved this. No Americans, no Brits, no native English speakers have gotten this right. The 3 people that have solved this equation, Japan, Egypt, no. You keep dreaming big. It's okay. What's going on there? You my translators today? They're in their sound booth. They're like rocking out with, this is nice. But all 3 of these individuals came from split families. So for instance, the student in Japan had an American father and a Japanese mother. The student in Egypt was studying high-level science, but then also had an emphasis on literature. And this is something I want to encourage you to do. At the end of this presentation, I'll give you prescriptions. How can you overcome these cognitive deficits that we have in the 21st century to have the mindset to be an effective leader? This is the purpose of this exercise. It's not to make you feel stupid, although part of me is enjoying this exercise right now. I would do much worse than you're doing on this if this was given to me the first time. But the real reason is that my argument is that you can rewire your brain. It's incredibly plastic to get outside of the default neural settings that lead us to make bad decisions, that lead us to have a stunted view of the world, that lead us to be less empathetic, and that prevent us from being as imaginative and creative and solving the big freaking problems. Right? So the goal today is to inspire you to have a certain curiosity and a certain mindset that you can try to get outside of your own brain. In fact, where do we steal most of our words in the English language? Latin. And the word for education, educare, means to lead out, to get out. And that is the purpose of education, in my mind, particularly for the volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous world you have inherited. You need to get outside of your own cognitive deficits so that you can take your decision-making, your communication, and your leadership to the next level. Okay, let's do an auction. Who wants some money? Okay. Okay. Do you know what an auction is? So let's say I wanted to auction off this microphone. The most dangerous place in this room right now is between me and this microphone. I like this microphone. And I said, who would like to bid $1 for this? Okay. Who would like to bid $2? Who would like to bid $3? $4? And the last person raising their hand at that price would have to pay me that money, and they would then get the microphone. We are going to do an auction right now, but there's a difference with this auction. These are Sam rules. We will only do multiples of 50. So please don't shout out a certain number. I will say who will bid $50, who will bid $100, who will bid $150. You cannot say, I'm bidding $26,000 right off the bat. Okay? And usually in auctions, you do have the capacity to bid in multiples that are not predetermined. The feature that distinguishes this auction from the usual auction is that the second highest bidder, the person who has their hand up second to last, has to pay the money that they bid. Let me give you an example of this. I used a mix of Russian and Serbian names here because I think those are the two countries most represented in this room. If Anna bids 200 and Ivana bids 150, this means Anna will win the $1,000 that I am auctioning off. Ivana, though, needs to pay me 150, and Anna will get back 800, which is the difference between what she bid and the $1,000. So there are two distinguishing marks here. The first distinguishing mark is the second place bidder has to give me the cash, and the other distinguishing mark is that the person who ends up winning only gets the difference of what they bid and the $1,000. This is complicated, but I want you to anchor in on this example with Anna and Ivana. Okay? So let's say I bid 500, and Mr. Osborne bids 450. Who wins the auction? I do. I get $500, and Mr. Osborne has to pay out $450. Okay? Look at me if you understand. Look down if you're hopelessly lost. Well, you're always hopelessly lost. You laugh at my jokes, you have terrible taste. Okay, let's start the bidding. Are you ready? I have $1,000 in my wallet. I think the ruble right now is 64. So if we need to do a conversion, that's 64,000. Is that right? 64,000 rubles. That's not bad cash. You're going to have a fun night tonight. Okay? 64,000 rubles, $1,000. You can pick the currency. Who would like to start the bidding at $50? Raise your hand. Who would like to bid $100? Raise your hand. Who would like to bid $150? Raise your hand. Who would like to bid $200? Raise your hand. Okay, so we have two over here. Who would like to bid $250? Okay. Who would like to bid, we got the people in the booth, both of them going up there. Who would like to bid $300? Who would like to bid $350? Okay, I'm going to stop right now. And the reason why I'm going to stop right now is I want you to tell me what's going to happen here. I'm going to become a billionaire. Damn right, this is why I do it. RANEPA doesn't pay me enough, so I come in here and I steal students' money. That's my quest. That's why I accepted the invitation to come to summer campus. Every single time I do this, who wants to bid 6.6 million? Who wants to bid 3.3 trillion? Because once you have raised your hand, it's going to stay up. Here's an important principle for leadership. Sometimes effective leadership is no action at all. And that we have an instinct to act. Let me go back to my father, a medical doctor. You want to know why healthcare costs are so high? One contributing factor is that if you're a doctor and you fear a malpractice suit, if someone's going to say, my mother died because you didn't do a test, what are you going to do? You're going to order lots of tests. That there's a bias towards action there. Because if you didn't do something, you're more likely to get in trouble for that. If you just stayed to the side and let the action go by, you think that you're more likely to have that finger pointed at you. But oftentimes, effective leadership is knowing when it's your moment, when you have the skills and the qualifications and the message to make your argument. And having that knowledge that sometimes effective leadership is spectating, or effective leadership is waiting until you're prepared, you will be more prepared if that's the case, if you have the confidence to be able to understand that. Okay, your papers again. Please get out your notebooks. This is the number 1. Now, because of the way that PowerPoint is structured, that is Roman numeral 1. Okay, that's not I. That is Roman numeral 1. It just doesn't look like a Roman numeral 1. And that is letter A. Then I want you on your paper to give enough space. So give significant space like I have up here on the PowerPoint. To have 6, the Roman numeral 6, and F. F is the 6th letter in the Latin alphabet. Okay? So you have 1, Roman numeral 1, A. Then you have 6, Roman numeral 6, F. Give enough space in between. Okay, good, good. Okay, make sure that you give yourself lots of writing space here as you write this down on your paper, okay? Good. Okay, I don't know why you did that. Just do the thing. Okay. When you have completed this on your paper or on your smartphone, look up at me so I know we can continue. Good. Here's what's going to happen. I'm going to break you into 2 rival teams. And this is this complex mathematical formula that I worked on all night to break you up into teams. You ready? This side of the room is one team, this side of the room is the other team. Now, this side of the room right now, you are going to complete this sequence going horizontally. Now, don't do anything yet, but you will go horizontally. So you will go in order across the page. So if it's 1, Roman numeral 1, and A, the second thing you'll do is do, in the same order, 2, Roman numeral 2, B. Now, don't do it yet. Please stay up. You all will go vertical. So what you'll do is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, Roman numeral 1, Roman numeral 2, Roman numeral 3. Okay? Do you understand this? Horizontal, vertical, go. And look up when you finish. Okay, I'm going to put this side of the room out of your misery. This side of the room is struggling like there's no tomorrow. This side of the room is thinking, I'm at the beach right now, I'm drinking a lemonade with the little umbrella inside of it. Why? This side of the room had a complex task. You had to switch your cognitive frameworks. So this side of the room, you got to think all in numbers, then all in Roman numerals, then all in letters. You didn't have to rapidly switch. This side of the room had to switch every single 1/10 of a second. What principle do you think I'm trying to illustrate for leadership in the 21st century? We right now, because our brain is naturally distracted all the time, even a sea slug, these aren't even conscious beings. If you show them new information, new stimuli, the first time, their brain lights up like a pinball machine. By the 20th time you show a sea slug information, it barely lights up at all. We are addicted to novelty. And because we're addicted to novelty, we're constantly switching from one task to the other. Are you familiar with the English word multitasking? That's not a word. Neurologically, there's no such thing as multitasking. All you're doing is rapidly switching from one task to another. You cannot do two things at once. You can't neurologically pat your head and rub your stomach at the same time. What you're really doing is switching quickly between them. He's just switching quickly between them, and you look like a fool right now, too. Make that his profile picture. Who? You need to be a unitasker. You need to get singular focus. You familiar with the terminology emotional intelligence quotient? It was coined by someone named Daniel Goleman, popularized by someone named Daniel Goleman. The last book that he wrote was called Focus. And one of his arguments is that one of the top skills for leadership in the future is who can focus on a task. Because when you have singular focus and you immerse yourself in something, you're more likely to work at a higher level. You're more likely to be creative. You're more likely to come up with solutions like 10 to 11 equals 1050. Okay, I want you to remember these words. So I'm going to go to the next slide, and then I'm going to see how many of these words you can memorize. So I'm going to give you a little bit of time to look at these, and then I'll go to the next slide. Now I'll go to the next slide, and you will have to tell me how many words you memorized. No, I'm just kidding. I lied to you. I have another task. We're going to read this passage, and then I'm going to ask you questions about him. This is not Donald Trump. I have nightmares about that Cheetos-colored-faced person. Donald spent a great amount of his time in search of what he liked to call excitement. That actually would be Donald Trump. He has climbed Mount McKinley, shot the Colorado Rapids in a kayak, driven in a demolition derby, piloted a jet-powered boat without knowing much about boats. He has risked injury and even death a number of times. Now he is in search of a new excitement. He was thinking perhaps he would do some skydiving or maybe cross the Atlantic in a sailboat. By the way he acted, one could readily guess that Donald was perfectly aware of his ability to do many things well. Other than business engagements, Donald's contacts with people were rather limited. He felt he didn't really need to rely on anyone. Once Donald made up his mind to do something, it was as good as done, no matter how long it might take or how difficult it might be. Only rarely did he change his mind, even when it might well have been better if he had. Now, in your head, right now, you have a certain understanding of what type of person Donald is. Many people in this room, statistically, think Donald, maybe because it's Donald Trump, but think Donald is someone you would not want to spend time with. And one of the reasons why this is the case is because I gave you negative adjectives first, even though it was entirely unrelated to Donald and the kayak. If I had given you positive adjectives first, or maybe a name that's not associated with Donald Trump, you would have had positive reactions to this Donald. You would have thought this Donald was a risk taker. You would have thought this Donald could accomplish things, that this was someone who was confident. But because I gave you the negative words first, or because it was associated with Donald Trump, you would think this person is not good. Right? If I talk about death and disease, and then I have you leave the room, you will walk out slower than if I talk about youth and energy and vitality and Usain Bolt. Okay? Our minds are incredibly influenced by what we see and what we hear. I'll give you an example of this. If one of your tutors or moderators, before you had walked in here, had said something really positive about me, you would have had a different impression about the way that I speak than if they had said something really negative. Because effective communication and just the way that we behave in general, we walk on a tightrope. So an effective communicator needs to be confident but not arrogant. An effective communicator needs to be creative but also organized. An effective communicator needs to be masculine but also feminine. And if someone had said negative words about me before I came in, and I start speaking to you with confidence, what will you think it is actually? Arrogance. But if they had said something positive before, you're more likely to think that that's confidence. That's why you care so much about the gossip at the lunch table, because it makes a huge impact on how people receive you. This is why VK and Facebook are such effective advertising companies, because they know that the best recommendations are the recommendations that come from people that are in your networks, that are your acquaintances or that you're friends, because we listen to that information even more. Okay, let me give you some final subscriptions, and then I am going to open it up to your questions. When I was trained as a high school teacher, I was told that the worst thing you could do is say, do you have any questions? That what you always need to say is, what are your questions? Meaning that the default is that everybody has questions. Back at my university in the United States, Georgetown University, I'll kick students out of the class. If I pause and I say, what are your 3 questions right now? And she doesn't have 3 questions, I say, please leave. Yeah, I'm tough. But it's also what you should be as students, people who are constantly questioning. So right now, start to gather these questions, but let me give you some humble advice about how you can overcome your own cognitive deficits. First of all, serendipity. Does anybody know what that fancy word means? I call this accidents or surprises that we're not expecting, things that we find that we didn't set out to look for in the first place. One of my frustrations with my student back at home is that they want me to give them the syllabus and the readings and tell them exactly what to read. And I say, you know what? You need to go out and find the readings. Because if I just give you a syllabus with these prescribed readings, I'm giving you my mind. You should go out and find other things that I potentially have not been exposed to. I can give you some of the foundational readings, but you need to fill in the blanks. One of my favorite moments, and this is a problem if you took a picture of either my room at home or my office at university, nobody would be in these seats right now. You would think I was a serial killer because I have 3,000 books all over the place. In fact, if you go to the library at Georgetown University, there's a poster of my face, and it says, Most Wanted, Dead or Alive. Because I show up to the library looking for one book, but I look at all the bookshelves, and then I see, oh, wow, this book's interesting. And I take that, oh, this book's interesting. It's an addictive disorder that I have. But what I could do, and I do this sometimes when I get lazy, is I could press a button on the computer that delivers the specific books that I want right to my office. That's not good in this information age. Someone wrote a book called The Filter Bubble. And this person made an argument that we're living in these information cocoons. So he signed on to Facebook one day, and on the news feed, he himself is politically liberal. He didn't see any stories from his conservative friends. And he wanted to know why, because he likes to learn about the conservative position politically. And the reason why is because Facebook, how do they make their money? They make their money to get you to stay on the website so they can get more advertising cash. And you will stay on the website if you like your experience more. Well, if you're liberal, Facebook has made the decision, we're not going to show this person conservative news stories because then they're not going to like their experience. So they edit all of those out. And with technology, with your smartphones, you're more likely to see things that are just like you because your brains love things that complement it, that confirm what it already thinks, what it already knows. And you need to get outside of that. Flawsome. This is a combination of flaws, weaknesses, and awesome. Oftentimes in leadership, we think that we have to show that we're perfect, that we know all the answers. But interestingly, the theme of my communication lecture in a couple days is going to be that the 2 most important qualities in communication are to show that you're competent and to show that you're trustworthy. And if you're constantly saying, I have all the answers, people will think that person's not that competent if they don't know about their own ignorance, but also that person's not trustworthy. Right? I don't believe someone who says they know everything in the future. And so you need to have an understanding, and I'll tell you an anecdote about this in 2 days, that you have flaws and you're confident enough to recognize them. Right? That's true confidence, that's true charisma. Thirdly, the signature pose of the era. Does anybody know what the signature pose of the era is? Can I see this evil device? Thank you. That is the signature pose of the era. The selfie. We have become increasingly narcissistic because of what the landscape looks like. And we're more likely to flaunt ourselves or our own perspectives. And you need to find some way to puncture this, to pop this. How can you get outside of your own mind and your own perspective so that you have a panoramic vision of the world and not just a vision that's coming from your own eyes? This is the Anna approaches the bank. Can you picture the river, the snow, and the dirt along with the financial bank? Yes, you're going to have a first instinct, but try to think about that blind man on the road. What would it be like to be blind yourself? Fourthly, the Latin roots of competition is not to fight. The Latin root of competition literally translates into strive together, work together. One of my favorite stories of this is a famous football player, American football. Whenever he gets hit hard by the opposing team, whenever they sack him, he gets up and he congratulates the opposing player. And the opposing player is thinking, are you crazy? Why are you congratulating me? I just hit you on your tushy. This is great here. And they think that he's playing a mind game with him. That if I say something that's so shocking to him, if we're opponents, and he punches me in the face, and I say, that's a really nice punch, man, congratulations. He's thinking, what the hell, this guy's crazy. No, but really what you should think is, if I truly want to get to the next level, if I want to elevate myself, the better he performs, the better I'll perform. So even though he's my competitor, the fact that we're in this struggle together and he's competing, if I should want him to perform better, because that will make me perform better as well too. Do not think of competition as a zero-sum game. When I was a basketball coach of younger kids, I would always schedule before the playoffs the most difficult schedule, the best teams in the league, because my ultimate goal was to win the championship at the end of the season. And so to prepare for that championship, I needed to have the best possible competitive opponents. And then finally, we mentioned this just a couple seconds ago, unitasking over multitasking. Shelley Turkle, professor at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, just finished a book called Reclaiming Conversation. And in this book, she talks about how difficult it is for her students to pay attention for long periods of time. In fact, look at this room right now. Well, I got people's attention now. If I had made this presentation, and this has happened, this is my 5th year at summer campus, you all, technically on paper, are the best students we've ever had on summer campus. You went through the most competitive selection process ever. But you pay less attention than your colleagues 5 years ago. And it's not your fault. It's not necessarily my fault for being more boring. It's that your brain has been rewired to not be able to pay attention for longer periods of time. In fact, you have the same attention span as a goldfish. And one of my arguments is to retrain your brain to be able to pay attention for long periods of time. There are some people in this room right now who I have not seen without complete focus on me right now. It's astounding in this age that you can do this. In fact, if I wanted to predict who the most successful people would be, controlling for other variables, the one variable I would use would be who is the most locked in right now, who is focusing. Right? And you can train your brain like a muscle. So how do you make your muscles bigger? But what do? It's not just you're lifting weights. The act of lifting weights, what are you doing? No, you're tearing your muscles apart so that then they grow back even stronger. And you need to do the same thing with your brain. You make your brain uncomfortable. And when you make your brain uncomfortable, you're more likely to have it be stronger. Right? Okay, last thing I want to mention. 3 hardest words in the English language, I don't know. Right? That's hard to say. But you need to get comfortable saying it. That you need to have this mind that is this, you celebrate the ignorance. You pursue not knowing, because that in itself is a form of knowledge. Right? What's that dude doing over here? You okay? Don't go to the bathroom over there. That's not good. Nobel Prize winner Isaac Rabbi, he said that when he sat down at dinner at the end of a school day, instead of having his parents ask him, what did you learn today? What do you now know? They wanted to know, what question did you ask today? Did you ask a good question today? Right? Every 20 minutes that someone's speaking at summer campus, try to generate at least 3 questions. Right? Try to generate 3 questions for every 20 minutes. Right? What do you want to know about? Because I think one of the best characteristics you can cultivate is curiosity. So the boring conference. This is a conference, instead of talking about leadership and conflict and listening to ministers of communication and the head of the Duma, these topics are grass growing, bus routes, electric hand dryers. And if you're really a curious person, you would think, wow, that's a cool conference. I want to go there. I want to know how the bus routes are different in Beijing versus Belgrade versus St. Petersburg. I want to figure out how they design that. I really want to know at what speed grass grows and whether or not there's certain ways to be able to grow grass at different speeds. Right? That is what you want to end up aspiring to. Can you flex this curiosity? And one of the best ways to do that is not to think of the world as a puzzle, but as a mystery. Anybody know why this is the case? If you want to generate lots of questions, why would you want to think of problems as mysterious instead of just as jigsaw puzzles? How many of you have liked to solve a puzzle a second time or a third time? But mysteries keep us coming back. You think about the movies that we rewatch. If it's a movie that has to do with the big surprise at the end, we like the movie, but we usually don't rewatch it. If there's a movie that doesn't quite solve everything for us, we tend to rewatch it. And it's the same with the books that we read. Right? So if you can combine this pursuit of ignorance with this belief that the problems that you're facing are mysterious and that the best ways to approach them is to try to get as many different experiences and perspectives as possible, you will more likely solve that problem. When I ended my formal education, how many years do you think I spent in school? Any guesses? Without a break. It will depress you. 10 years? I guess I'm not a good speaker. 15? 6 years. I spent 27 consecutive years in school. Yeah, 27 consecutive years, as in from the age of 3 until I finally got my PhD. Right? When I finished my PhD, after 27 years, and to get a PhD, you have to write a book of about 300 pages. And I spent 7 years just on this degree. Before I had that PhD, I had to get 2 master's degrees. And I had 2 bachelor's degrees. So this is a long way in school. And then to get that degree, I had to read 1,000 books on one specific topic and then write my own book. And that process took 3 years. And when I finally finished the defense of my book, I had 3 famous political scientists that were interrogating me. And I was expecting them to bring out a cake with whipped cream on the top and maybe high-five me and give me hugs and start singing songs about me. Instead, my dissertation advisor said, "Congratulations, Sam. You now know that you know a little small thing about a small thing, about a smaller thing, about something even smaller, out of one country out of 192 countries." And I said, "Thank you for the most anticlimactic congratulations ever." Right? But I'll tell you what, the way that you can judge your own education, whether or not it's when you finish your master's degree at RANEPA, or whether or not it's when you finish your bachelor's degree or somewhere in between, when you finish your education, if you are more curious when you leave than you were when you entered, then you had a good education. That's the only way that I evaluate my students' education. I ask them, do you want to go read more books now than you did 4 years ago? Are you interested in more questions now than you were before you started? And if that's the case, you will have had a successful education. I want to thank you for your semi-attention, and I'll open it up to your questions now. Thank you. And that's my contact information. You can find me on LinkedIn or Facebook. Please feel free to find me there. Okay. What are your questions? Raise your hand. Yes. Nigeria.
Can you name a person who has had a tremendous impact on you as a leader? Why and how did he impact on you? Or she.
I think the most formative and influential person obviously starts closer to home with most of us. So for me, it would most likely be my father. And two main stories I think can encapsulate the reason why. First, when I was between the ages of 5 and 10, my father is a doctor of the brain. And he's, yes, a neurologist, neurosurgeon, and he's one of the more prominent doctors in my country. And so he typically gets the most difficult cases. People that are about to die of brain tumors, who have serious Alzheimer's or Parkinson's. And he would bring me into work on Saturday. My mother would take some of my other brothers and sisters to their sports competitions, and I would go in with my father to the hospital. And as he would go in to read the paperwork of people's brains, I would be sitting on the sickest ward with the people that were dying of brain cancer, or the people that were afflicted with progressive Parkinson's disease. And to be able to see people's reaction as my father walked the corridor and the hope that would come in their eyes had a big impact. That you can use the experience and the knowledge that you have to make other people's lives somewhat better, even when they don't have that much hope. The second anecdote I would tell you would be when we were alpine ski racing in Colorado. And my father is, in some ways, aggressively reckless when it comes to sports. And we skied in the hardest slope in the entire country. And it even says, ski at your own risk. If you get hurt, nobody will save you. And it was 3 of his sons. I'm the oldest of a big Italian family. And we were between the ages of 6 and 14, and then my father. And as we were skiing down, 2 of my brothers were with me. The brother that's closest to my age, we were skiing together. We get down to the bottom of the mountain, and we're waiting for 15 or 20 minutes, and we don't know what's up, and our stomachs are growling because we want to eat lunch. And then my third brother, Michael, comes down, and we say, "Where's Dad?" And he said, "Well, Dad's up there. I'm going to go get lunch right now." And I said, "Well, why is he still up there?" And he said, "Oh, he broke his leg." And I said, "Well, geez, you're laughing at that? Jeez. You laugh at everything." And I said, "Well, how do you know he broke his leg?" And he said, "Well, the bone is through the skin, so I can see it." Yeah, you're not laughing at that now. Yet his first instinct, the first reaction my father had while the bone was through his skin, and he wasn't even assured that he'd live because it says ski at your own risk, nobody's going to rescue you in these complex mountains, and the helicopter has to come, but no helicopter is going to come for him. We should have used this helicopter. Was to give his son a $20 bill so that he could go get lunch. Right? That was his first instinct in that time. And so much of, oftentimes I get asked the question, are leaders born or are they made? Now I make money saying you can be made a leader. So obviously I'm going to say they're made. Otherwise I don't have a job. No more trips to Russia if they're born. But one of the reasons I think they're made is because so much of leadership is overcoming instinct. There's a book called Leaders Eat Last, which is that effective leaders eat last because they want to take care of their own people. Right? And that's overcoming your own instincts of survival. Okay. Yes?
Sam, you've been talking about how minds can be preconditioned before they confront a particular situation or a particular person or a particular situation. When you look at the people in this room, with many of whom will have international careers, many of whom will travel internationally, including myself, when someone meets for the first time a British person, they have preconditioned impressions of Britain. When someone meets a Russian person, because largely negative publicity about Russia, they're preconditioned to treat a Russian person or a Nigerian person, or a Serbian person, or a Kyrgyzstani in a particular way. Now, we're all going to confront that, right? You included as an American. Many stereotypical negative thoughts about America preconditioned in the minds of the people you meet and you wish to influence or you wish to sell. So when you know that that preconditioning is in the other person's mind as you walk towards them to shake their hand, and this is going to happen to everybody in this room,
Right.
all through their lives, what suggestions, what advice would you have?
Good, thank you. And this is a perfect question to set up and advertise my next lecture on communication, because this is what it's at. So much of any communication interaction is knowing what the person you're speaking to, what they're thinking. So I think the greatest superpower in the world that you can have is the same superpower that Mel Gibson has in the movie What Women Want, where he knows exactly what that person's thinking at all times. Here was the question I was going to ask you in the public speaking section. What is the most important thing about public speaking? What is the most important thing about communication? And I would say, I'll put my whole wallet, like dropping the mic, I'll drop the wallet, and if you answer the question, you take that wallet with you. I didn't bring my wallet because this dude's going to steal it from me. I heard eye contact. I heard confidence. Ability to listen. Okay, good. She got it, but I've already told you the answer. But almost nobody ever says this. They never say audience. They say eye contact, they say preparation, they say energy, they say knowledge. They forget the audience. You know this philosophical conundrum? If a tree falls in a forest and nobody is there, does it make a sound? If you give a speech and it doesn't move your audience, if it doesn't reach your audience, it's like it didn't even exist. If none of you spoke English, it really wouldn't matter what I said today. So there's another element of this communication, that effective communication in the 21st century, so much of it will be driven to respond to this addiction that we have for novelty. I can barely keep some of the best students in Russia and internationally, I can barely keep their attention for more than 30 seconds right now. And so one of the ways that I can get your attention is if I surprise you. So if your preconception of me as an American is that I don't know anything about geography, I don't know any languages, and I don't like Russia. Well, if I come in and I say, "Как вам мой английский?" and then I talk about my trips to Krasnoyarsk, and to Novosibirsk, and to Sochi, and Ryazan, and Krasnogorsk, and then I talk about my love for Russian literature and my students in Russia, well, guess what? I completely surprised you. And so much of effective persuasion is about convincing people who disliked you in the beginning. And think about this. In a room, 220 people, and 219 people really like you, you're going to go to the 219 people all the time. You want to be around the people who like you. My challenge to you is start to have the instinct to go to that one person that dislikes you. That will be the more interesting conversation. So I like these moments. A couple people in this room, Michael and Asselbach in particular, have done programs where I purposely try to get people together that disagree. And one of the reasons why I do that is because I think solutions and effective communication normally comes from that tension, that intellectual abrasion. And so this stereotype, I think, can be used for positive developments.
Michael,
Where are you from?
from Russia, Moscow.
Moscow.
I've got a question. You talked much about what makes brain better and what makes leadership better. And talking about the practice, today, the students in this campus are working in groups. And I, as a tutor, noticed that some of them are like more natural readers. Some of them face some difficulties in showing up and showing their leadership skills, developing them. So what would you suggest? What are 2, 3 the best ways of developing personal leadership in groups?
Well, let me push you a little bit. I want to respond to this because it depends what the definition of leader is. And so one thing I didn't do today that I would do if I had more sessions with you, or that we can do when we have a meal together or some other question sessions, is actually define in a serious way what leadership is. So to me, leadership isn't necessarily speaking the most publicly. Leadership isn't necessarily being the one that makes the decisions. In fact, I think the most important development for the future is not necessarily effective leadership, but effective followership. Right? And that one of the ways that you can redefine leadership in your group work is you have a group goal, and that is to offer the best case study performance possible. And people have different roles to contribute to that. So for instance, let's say you are more introverted, and you're less likely to assume a public leadership role as we normally define it. Introverts actually outperform extroverts in many leadership characteristics. They tend to be more creative, they tend to be more psychologically adept, they tend to be more collaborative, and they also tend to be more persuasive when it comes to their written projects and to how they order the arguments. And so an effective group would be a group that would figure out how to utilize the talent that's on that team in the best places that that talent should be utilized. So I never like to urge an introvert to be more extroverted. I never like to urge someone who's not speaking as much to speak as much just to speak as much. If you have the solutions to the problem and you're not bringing them to the forefront, that's an issue. When I was a teaching assistant and I would have 20 students in a group and I had to grade them on how they participated in class, typically what the teaching assistant would do was they would give people the best grades on how many times they raised their hand and spoke. And I thought that was terrible because I could raise my hand and I could say, "The sky is blue." And that would count as a check for most of the teaching assistants that were my colleagues. But for me, I wanted to grade you based on the effectiveness of that contribution, not how many times you contributed. Right? But reframe the way that we think about leadership, which is you have a group task, whatever that task is, and you need to figure out the best way to assemble the people to reach that task. And you need to figure out what your specific skills are to reach that task. So let's say you have a team that has 7 extroverted people that like to make decisions all the time. That might not be the best team. But an effective leader could be the individual who realizes that and takes on a different role. Even though they're used to speaking all the time or deciding all the time, they adjust and understand that that could hurt the overall chemistry of the team.
Okay, I wanted to ask, like you said, you've been in school for more than 27 years.
Well, I'm out of school now.
You're out of school, sorry.
No, I'm always in school.
Okay, basically, a lot of us as students, we get to meet different professors, people with different ideas and ideologies, and we get fed all this information. We're just receiving and trying to model ourselves into something good and perfect. But how are we able to, make ourselves, not just take the identity of someone, but also while taking in, build ourselves to be ourselves?
Mm-hmm. Do you know one of the best blessings I have is being a teacher, and whenever I read a book, I'm addicted to books. I try to read 1 book every single day. If I'm on planes, 2 books every day. And someone asks me, "How do you remember this information? Isn't it a waste? Because you have all this information coming in, how do you actually retain it?" And my secret of this retention is that I'm reading a book for my students. Because as a teacher, I have an opportunity then to transmit that information. If you have the same flip in your brain when you're listening to this information, and you're going to go to the lunch pretty soon, actually, I think you have one more lecture between lunch. Can we sneak in a pizza or something here? So when you go to the lunch, and there were other people who skipped my lecture today, could you restate what I said, not just the information objectively, but can you add your own critique to it? Which is, here was Professor POTOLICCHIO's definition of education. He said education was getting outside of your own brain and rewiring your neural default settings. But one of the weaknesses I thought in his presentation was he didn't necessarily give us the specific steps on how to do it. Here's how I would have done it. Or how about this? Does anybody have a book with them? Do you know what books are? They have their devices. But does anybody have a novel or, not necessarily novel, okay, fiction. Oh, this is, okay, Ernest Hemingway. This is a novel. Adios a las armas. Farewell to the arms. Farewell of arms, right? Where are you from? Where in Spain? I used to live in Segovia. So if I'm reading a book, the first thing that I do with the book is I look at the title. This is more difficult with a novel, but let's just pretend this was a work of social science. And I try to think, what do I think this title, what do I think the author is going to talk about? What do I think the thesis is going to be? What do I think the ultimate trajectory and evidence will be? And then I look at the back of the book, which normally has the thesis and the summation of the evidence, and then I think, okay, this is what this author thought. Then I open up the book, and I look at the table of contents. And then I think, if I was writing this book, what would my arguments be for each one of the chapters? And then I actually read the book, and I compare my brain to their brain. So the best way to prepare for a lecture for one of your professors, and try to do this for the rest of summer campus, and on the night of the 26th, tell me if you noticed a difference the way that you paid attention. So the title of this lecture in your program, I believe, was Leadership for the 21st Century. Before you walk in, think about if I handed you the microphone. What's your name? Rachel. I said, Rachel, I'm tired today. You know, I'm getting older. I was up late watching you guys try to dance. No, I'm just kidding. And I just don't have the energy to give a 2-hour lecture. Rachel, you're going to lecture on ooh, you got scared there. You're going to lecture on 21st century leadership. What would you say? What would you do? And so if you're thinking about that the 5 minutes before you come into my session, then when I say something, I might have left something out that you're curious about. But then if I say something, you might disagree with something I said. And that's how you do this. You don't want to be, as you said, molded. And one of the root words of education means to mold or to train. But my root of education is to lead out. And one of the ways you can lead out is think, where do I diverge with him? Where do I disagree with him? Where do our brains not overlap here? And you only know that if you gave it an attempt before I did. Thank you. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Sam, for this amazing lecture. I'm just a little bit curious if, for example, you are asked to estimate how many planes right now are in the air or how many windows in this building. So how would you answer this question? Do you have some kind of strategy or some useful tips to succeed in this valuation thing, or would you be creative using your critical thinking? What I'm trying to ask you, what would be your focus on this question, like this tricky question?
I have a big smile right now because a question that just before I walked into this hall that I was going to ask is almost exactly what she just asked me. And the question was, how many piano tuners are there in Chicago? The people that fix pianos, right? And the process, this is a question that you may get if McKinsey, I think you have the leader of McKinsey Russia coming in right after me. Google, some of these companies that try to have innovation and creativity up here, they ask questions like this. There's a recent book that was published by Angela Duckworth at the University of Pennsylvania called Grit. And one of the arguments that if you want to see who is going to be successful in the future, it's how much mental toughness do they have? Do they give up on difficult problems? So another question I might have asked was an impossible math equation that could not be solved. And one of the arguments of Grit is that the people who struggle the longest on this are more likely to have the characteristics to be successful in the future. The people who give up right away are people who might not be as successful. So if she asked me how many windows are in this entire resort, some of you will say, I have no idea. But some of you, as you rightly say, will start to think about this creatively. And what you'll do is you'll take a big problem and you'll look at smaller elements of that problem. And you'll think, okay, how many sub-buildings are in each, how many windows then are on each floor in these sub-buildings? And then you start to go through the process that way, where it's a checklist of smaller questions that can help you solve the bigger question.
Thank you, Sam. So now it seems like the time was you.
Are you copying me right now? You just put your hand in your
Okay.
pants?
So-
Don't put your hand on the side.
Okay. You're every
You feel
time,
awkward now, yeah?
Every time is like the first time. Thank you, Sam. I barely saw you without a book. So can you tell us your reading techniques, how you read, what kind of books, and have you got a phone now? You still have no phone?
I did receive a phone for Christmas, and even though I'm grateful for the person who gave me that gift,
Yes.
it is the worst gift I've ever been given. You know, the first time I was in Moscow, this was maybe 5 years ago, and the ruble was 29 to 1. Those were different days. And as a professor, you don't necessarily get the biggest salary, and I was hanging out with investment bankers, and we went to the White Rabbit in Moscow, which is pretty expensive, and we played Russian roulette, but it was called credit card roulette. And what we did was we put all of our credit cards on the table, and we would randomly pick out a credit card, and the credit card that was picked out would have to pay for the whole meal. So my hand was shaking as I put the credit card in there. But then the game got really good for me, because then we played cell phone roulette. And everybody put their cell phone on the table, and the first person to look at their cell phone, either for a text message or just to look at the time, had to pay for the whole meal. It was awesome for me, because I would order the most expensive wine and desserts because I didn't have a cell phone. I didn't even put my cell phone on the table.
Yeah.
But my reading technique, here's my goal for you. Every single week, try to read 3 books. It's a tough goal. Sometimes if you aim for the moon, you hit the stars, whatever that cliche is. One book is a biography every week, and it's in different disciplines, because then you can compare your own trajectory to the trajectory of others. Think about the questions you've all asked me. They've all been personal. They haven't been theoretical. How did you do this? What do you think about that? That's biographies, or these natural teachers. The second book you should read is a book of fiction or poetry. One, this expands your vocabulary, and you can be unique in the combinations that you use, and people will find you more interesting. But also, you get a sense of empathy when you read poetry and fiction. The first time I gave a speech after sanctions were applied to Russia, the first question I got was, have you ever been to Russia before? And I said, well, calm down. I've been to more cities in Russia than you have, thank you very much. Then the second question I got was, who are your 5 favorite Russian authors? Not who's your favorite, who are your 5 favorite? And I answered 6 or 7, and I started showing off with different titles. And then the third question was, are you fluent in Russian? And I said, niet. Right? They finally got me, but think about that order there. Have you been to our country? Have you read our literature? Do you know our language? The literature is above the language, and that's how you get a sense of who people are and what they think. And the third book is usually on a subject that you don't know anything about. So if you say something to me about the World Trade Organization, and I don't even know what the WTO stands for, I'm not just going to go to Wikipedia. I'll try to get a book that's comprehensive that addresses this in more of a long form. Here's my other suggestion. When I read these books, I buy an expensive moleskin notebook. So I take it seriously. And every time I read something that I would find that I would want to tell Rachel, right? That I would want to tell you the next time I saw you, that's striking, that's interesting, I write it down in the moleskin notebook. And my goal every year is to fill up more pages than I did the previous year. And so you leverage that personal competition, right?
Yep. Sam, you're all about self-development, and my next question is going to be how to manage time in such a complex world when we have a cell phone distracting our every second, and like our friends calling us out like for a night out or something. How do you manage your time with your work?
Yeah.
And yeah.
I'm cutting you off, one, because we're running out of time, as you say, time. But the answer is right there on this slide, which I didn't show you, that I was going to wait to show you in a couple days. I choose to versus I have to. This is essentialism. You find out what's important in your life, and if something doesn't fit that, you cut it out. The Latin word for decision means to cut or to get rid of. Right? You make priorities. And if you can't make priorities, I usually show a video to younger students. So in Moscow, I teach high school students that are about to enter into RANEPA, and it's a video of jelly beans. So it makes everybody hungry. And there are a certain amount of jelly beans. And then they say 33% of your life will be spent sleeping, and it takes 33% of the jelly beans away. And then it says 20% of your life will be in personal maintenance or eating, and then it takes 20% of your jelly beans away. And it keeps doing these activities until you're only left with a few jelly beans. And the question is, how would you spend your time if this was your time? Right? You may have heard the formulation that Steve Jobs had, particularly when he was dying of cancer. He looked in the mirror and he said, if this was my last day, would I still do what I'm going to do? And if there are too many days in a row where you say, no, I wouldn't do this, then you're not necessarily living your life the way that you should. Right? But just cut. Learn how to say no. Look at Warren Buffett's investment strategy. It's no, he only says yes 10 times a year. That's his argument. It's no, 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 no. Let's practice this. Let's say no. No. Just get used to that word. That is the best word in the English language. No. Do you want to listen to my lecture anymore? No. I got you. I think we're out of time because I saw...
We have one more question.
We have one more... Oh.
Yeah. So
he said that with such an authoritative voice. It almost sounded like it was coming from the heavens up here. Oh, wow. That shirt. That is the best shirt in summer
Thank you.
camp.
Okay, thanks a lot. Thank you for the lecture. It was great.
Do I deserve a gift for the lecture?
Yeah.
Well, I want that shirt.
You can get it.
Yeah?
Yeah.
What size are you? Large?
This is medium.
Oh, I got to lose some weight then.
Okay. So my question is, what's your? I have two questions. So the first one is, what's
He's
your
cheating.
most,
Now he's got to give me 2 shirts.
your most ideal definition of a leader in the 21st century? Your most ideal definition.
Okay.
And I need it in just
One
one
sentence?
or 2 sentences.
God, he asks a lot of me.
Yeah. So maybe you give us the first answer, then I ask the second one.
And he's telling me how to do it too as well. This is authoritarian leadership here. So 1 sentence. Do you make people better? That's it, right? Are you making other people better? And that's the reformulation that you had over here. It's not necessarily the person that makes the final decision or the person that has the hierarchy power, but it's, are you making other people around you better? And I love watching sports to see this. To me, are you familiar with the sport of basketball? There's a difference between Michael Jordan, for instance, and Kobe Bryant. Both some of the best basketball players ever, but Michael Jordan raised the performance of his teammates, whereas Kobe Bryant didn't necessarily do the same. And so even if they had equal skills and shooting abilities and defense, everybody's always going to remember Michael Jordan, whereas Kobe Bryant will probably be forgotten in 20 or 30 years.
Okay, thank you. The second question is, we all suffer from cognitive deficits. So can you give me some, maybe 4 or 5 points how we can overcome cognitive deficits?
Yeah, so this was my argument here. My argument was to live a life where you're seeing less customization and you're getting outside of your own comfort zone. Number 2 is to be someone who's willing to be in a position that they don't necessarily have all the answers, that they don't have expertise. Number 3, how can you find a way to get inside the mindset of someone else, whether or not it's in travel, whether or not if you're really bad at math, do you take a math class on edX or Coursera or iTunes University? Number 4, think about how you think about competition. How are you making other people help you get better? And then finally, how can you work on flexing your attention skills? And if you can practice all 5 of these as a checklist, you'll be more likely to get over those cognitive deficits.
Thank you. There's an additional question, just an extra question. Yeah. You mentioned...
I better get that shirt, baby. You have my contact information there.
Okay. You mentioned someone that was a physics major and doing literature too, I think. I can't remember if it was physics.
Yes, perfect.
Sometimes doing 2 directly opposite things can be destructive rather than constructive. So what do you suggest? How do you choose, maybe if you want to...
In a world that is moving so quickly, my prediction is that you have no idea what the jobs will be in the future. In fact, the president of Harvard University, she makes the claim that we're preparing you not for your first job out of college, we're preparing you for your 6th job out of college. So if you become someone who learns just one specialty, 10 years from now, that can be completely worthless. So what I want you to focus on is how can you learn the habits of the mind. Rector Mao, this is someone who is running the biggest university in Europe. He serves on the most prestigious corporate boards in Russia, advises the top political leaders in the country. What did he say to you in that opening session on education? He basically said, we don't know what the future will look like, and so therefore we have to change the paradigm of education. That it needs to be about how can you adjust, how can you be flexible. So if you're studying physics and literature, you're getting your brain to be more supple and flexible. Right? You're learning those habits of mind that will help you adapt. I think the university of the future, I think you're going to be going to university when you're 65 or 70 years old, because you'll be going back every 6 months to learn a completely different profession or field. Right?
Thank you.
Thank you so much. I'll see you at lunch and dinner. That's the 6 people in the front.